Hi everyone, my name is Sam Bond and I'm going to be giving you guys a guest lecture on how to create infographics today. In case any of you are curious about what my experience is or want to see some of my work, I know sometimes when you are meeting instructors for the first time, it's good to see what their background is. You can always go to my website, which is sambondvisualization.com. But let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to be talking about what infographics are and some of the free ways that we can make good infographics, because I know there are a lot of really incredible, very powerful infographics out there, but with that there are also a lot of not so good infographics, and we want to go over what are some of the major design principles that you should be thinking about in order to make something that is really worthwhile. So let's just start off by why use infographics in the first place. It allows people to get a greater interest in your work, first of all. So if somebody doesn't have that much of a background in what you're doing and you're just trying to garner some interest in your personal research, infographics are a perfect way to have people immediately see what you're doing and have some sort of connection with it, have more of an interest in what you're doing. This also allows people to retain the content for longer. A lot of the purpose of an infographic is to take something that's really complex and boil it down to something that people can understand even without a background in your research. So let's say that you have been studying whatever it is your personal research is on for 3 to 4 years. Naturally, no one has that same background that you have. So you need to be able to boil down that content for all sorts of different audiences. Using infographics allows that to be broken down in a way that almost all audiences can really connect to it, and then from there they have a better memory of it as well. This also allows for a much better impact. It's a stronger connection with whatever your content is. So you know that rather than handing someone a text-based pamphlet on what your research is or on whatever data that you've collected, having some sort of visualization associated with it is going to have a much stronger effect on all of your viewers. And one of the biggest things is social media sharing. I know all of the JAMA magazines use social media sharing as a major factor in getting their research out there. Having an infographic allows you to publish this on the web, share it on Facebook or Twitter. It spreads much more rapidly, and you have a much wider audience to share your work with. So when do you actually want to use infographics? So you want to do this when you have a full story to tell. You don't really want to just gather a bunch of facts that sort of have a connection and cram them together in an infographic. You want to be able to have some sort of message that's all connected. When you need to boil down content for people to understand quickly, this is particularly good in things like poster presentations, when you know that the people that are going to be looking at your posters are only going to be there for 30 seconds at a time sometimes. So when you know that you need to take certain pieces of data and really condense them, or otherwise reaching out to an audience that doesn't necessarily have a research background, infographics are perfect for getting that content into a place where a variety of audiences can understand them. And data. Data visualization as a whole is kind of its own subset of things. We'll only be going a little bit into data visualization today, but visualizing big groups of data that are all connected are fabulous in infographics. So it sort of goes back to this idea of when you have a story to tell, when you have a bunch of data sets that are interconnected and have some sort of overall message, some sort of overall story, infographics are perfect for explaining that data, because you can take this visual story and bring this thread through all of your data, through all of the facts that you want to present. So let's talk about what good infographics do. They tell a story, And that means that you have some sort of common thread through all of the content. So everything should be connected. There should be nothing that's irrelevant to the overall message that you're giving. But then you should also have a common thread through your visuals. If you have photos, icons, symbols, you have a super wide variety of visual things on the page, there's nothing really in common there. You want to have some consistency in how your infographic looks. You want to have credible sources. This is like one of the biggest things in infographics. There are a lot of problems when, you know, someone might see a fantastic infographic, but the second you see that they don't have very credible sources or references towards the bottom, completely loses all of its meaning. When they have a variety of information types, a good infographic won't be entirely icons or symbols, and it won't be entirely text. Another thing you might see is when it's entirely bar graphs or entirely line graphs, you want to have a really wide variety of ways to communicate. It sort of allows you to translate different parts of your research, of whatever it is you're trying to explain. Keep the interest of your audience the whole time, and not necessarily get yourself stuck in this box where you're only explaining one type of thing using the same method over and over again. So, as I was saying, it goes for pretty much every part of an infographic. You should have a really wide variety of pieces of content in there. And then the last thing is you really need to have a balance of everything. You need to have a balance of colors. You need to have a balance of images. And we'll go into what a visual balance means in just a little bit. Bad infographics. You can see that I used this text for a very specific purpose. This is bad text on a gray background. Don't do this. But either way, one of the biggest sins in infographic creation is to have too much information on the page. It's when you look at one of those infographics that has like 2 entire pages worth of text on there. The idea of an infographic is to tell a story in a quick, concise way, to boil down information. So if you're putting a ton of information in there, you're kind of completely ignoring the purpose of doing an infographic in the first place. So you want to make sure that you're editing down your information to be relevant, concise, tell a story, but not necessarily include everything about it. One of the benefits of infographics is that it does get people interested in the content. So rather than including every piece of your manuscript into an infographic, include links at the bottom that could take them to more information. Too much text in the first place. So where too much information is like just piles and piles of content, too much text is text specific. So you may have like a concise story, but if there's too much of text alone, you're not really calling people to look at your thing. An infographic has the word graphic in it. You want to include those visuals. That's a big part of what makes them powerful, is trying to eliminate some of the text that you're asking people to go into. Visuals of the same importance. What this essentially means is visuals of the same size, of the same look. If everything is the exact same size on a page, like if everything kind of looks like a grid, that's fine technically because you can see everything, it's all legible, but you're not really asking for someone to travel through the page in a way that's interesting. They just sort of see this grid of images and they're not drawn anywhere to look at something. So we'll go into composition and layout, how to break up how important your images are in a little bit, but take away from this that whatever visuals you do have should be organized in a way that someone starts at a clear starting point and travels through your infographic like you're reading them the story on purpose. And then no resting space. A lot of bad infographics will fill every part of the page with content, whether that's text or images or super bold colors or lines or something. There's no resting space. If you consider like web design, really good web design, some of the nicer websites have white space. It's referred to as negative space for your eyes to just kind of rest. It's much more relaxing. It's much more pleasant for the user when they have parts of whatever design you have that are not filled with content, that allow them to focus on one section rather than being drawn all over the place. And then mismatched tone. This refers to, let's say you have an infographic on studying depression and you're using Comic Sans and pastel colors. Mismatched tone. That one is a little bit more self-explanatory, but it is something that I've seen a lot in things with relatively exciting, new, innovative topics. They might be using like shades of gray, black and white, the standard medical blue, rather than using colors that kind of match with what it is they're trying to say. So think about the tone of what your infographics is about and match the visual tone to what it is you're trying to say. And then the last thing on this is spelling and grammar errors. Nothing will make someone run faster from an infographic than seeing a spelling error or a grammatical error. So please proofread your work. You would be appalled at how many people do not do that. So let's go through some examples. All right, we're going to start with the good examples. Right down here, we have a food groups infographic. Notice at the top, you are immediately drawn to the title. We've got a little bit of text in here, not a whole ton, but a paragraph. You're naturally drawn down here. Now notice that in English, we read from left to right and from top to bottom. So in this case, you are kind of naturally drawn to go left to right, up to down. We get to another section. Notice this right here is some nice empty space for us to kind of rest on. It's not just filled up. We've got a really nice contrast between our two different elements, and it's kind of got a nice balance right here. And as we go through, everything is really nicely organized. And then towards the end, we have a combination of images and simple graphs. So it's not that we have like 1,000 different types of visuals. We pretty much just have photos and graphical elements like charts. That's pretty much it. So it's being very, very consistent with how it is visually designing everything. It's being very organized, and it's keeping in mind that we're going to start up here and we're going to travel downwards. Let's look at another one. We've got a similar thing here. We've got our big title. We've got our subtext. We naturally sort of gravitate to these bigger things over here. As we go down, this infographic in particular chose to literally put a thread through the story. So we're naturally following this because we're being told to follow it. This is sort of one big section right here, but as you get down, this news section is organized differently, but it's still sort of going within the thread that they've developed. You'll also notice that this one has a very consistent, simple info style. So all of these graphics are kind of done in the same look and feel. They're all minimalistic images, really, really clear to see. They've chosen one family of fonts, which is this tall sans serif font. And it's very, very easy to navigate through because it brings us down with these lines. Makes everything really consistent. And then we've got this area right here, which is a really nice sort of simple resting area for us to look at. And this area over here too. And then right at the bottom, they want to scream out their message to us. They're screaming it out right here. It's huge. Number 3, as we go through, Notice that it includes motion in this one. It does make it a little bit more laggy, but it is really interesting. Notice in a lot of these, they're very literally breaking things up into sections. So marketers are consumers too, breaking it up into sections and subsections. And our last nice one, it's the same thing. We've got a big image up top. We've got a variety of data types. We have consistent colors. We have consistent image styles. But we're sort of going through everything like a story. It's really easy to follow. Now, let's look at some bad examples. This one sort of seems fine from a distance until you realize that these numbers don't add up to 100% at all. So they are not credible at all. We've got this one right here. This is a good example of way too much information. This is highlighting this tiny thing over here that you can't really see any relevance of because you're kind of focusing on all of these colors up here. This is just an awful, terrible chart. This key up here almost looks as though it is describing an axis instead of being a key. So it's considering things like that. How are people following your data? Do we need all of this data? All right, this next one, good example of way too much information on here. Way too much information. We've got text over the tops of images. We've got the same icon just repeated over and over again. Our icons, our logos here don't necessarily match each other in tone. And then for some reason we have this awful color scheme. I really don't understand what they were thinking here with brown, green, black, and then social media icons. I don't know. And then this one here, we have just so many colors, all of the colors, and they don't necessarily go very well together. So it's something just to consider. And the last thing to notice is that they have these percentages on here, but they're tiny. They're tiny, and it's kind of difficult to follow everything here. The last thing that you want to do is make your user do more work by coming over here and having to sort of drag with your eyes each of the things from the key to the pie chart. Don't make your user do more work than they need to do. All right, so that is it for this section.